Hello everyone, welcome to How-FixIT. If your thermal pads were damaged during PS5 Slim maintenance, or the stock thermal pads have degraded, leading to poor heat dissipation and overheating components like VRMs, RAM, and SSD controller, you need to change them to restore proper cooling. In this video, I'll show you how to replace the thermal pads inside your PlayStation 5 Slim to restore proper cooling and prevent potential performance throttling or system shutdowns. Before we begin, here's a list of tools you'll need. Torx T8 security and Phillips 1 screwdriver. Tweezers, plastic pry tools. Thermal putty. I will be using Upsiren thermal putty, but there are also good alternatives like thermal Grizzly putty, including TG Putty Basic, Advanced, or Pro. If you need to replace the liquid metal, you will need a thermal Grizzly Conductonaut. You'll also need an anti-static brush, cotton swabs, and isopropyl alcohol, 90% or higher. I've included links to all the tools in the video description below. For a successful maintenance process of your PS5, I recommend using a magnetic mat to organize screws as you go. The PS5 Slim has screws of various sizes, so it's crucial to track each one. And you don't have to worry about the screws getting lost. They will all securely adhere to the magnetic mat. Now, let's get started. Place the console on its side with the disk drive facing up. The top cover is held in place by clips. Lift the front edge to release them. Use the cutout on the bottom corner of the disk drive to lift its right edge and disconnect it. Grab your Phillips screwdriver and remove the screw securing the expansion slot cover. Remove the screw securing the M2 SSD, then take off the SSD and spacer. Remove the plastic cover and disconnect the fan cable. Remove the 4 screws, then remove the fan. Use tweezers to remove the warranty sticker. Remove the 9 screws, then remove the plastic cover. Remove the 4 screws securing the metal cover. Use the tip of a pair of tweezers to lift the metal latch and release the connector. Keep the latch in its unlocked position and carefully pull the cable straight out of its socket. Disconnect the antenna cables and separate them from the housing. Remove the 30 screws securing the top metal plate. Use a spudger to pry the metal plate. Work your way around the perimeter until it separates. It may take some force to separate the plate because thermal pads bond the metal plate to the main board. Thermal pads are located on the inner side of the metal plate, and some of them may remain on the console's motherboard. A little later, I will show you how to check whether the thermal pads are still suitable for use. Remove the 2 screws securing the tension bracket, alternating turns to maintain even pressure on the bracket. Do not remove 1 screw at a time, or you may damage the APU chip. Be especially careful when removing the screws, and do not rush. If the screwdriver slips off the screw, you may scratch the surface of the motherboard, potentially causing damage. Remove 2 more screws securing the main board in place. Gently lift the bottom left corner of the motherboard with a plastic spudger to separate it from the power supply metal prongs and bottom metal plate. Remove the main board, flip it over, and carefully lay it on the housing. Now, I'll show you how to check whether your PS5 thermal pads need replacing. First, perform a visual inspection. Carefully remove the thermal pad and check for dryness, cracks, or shrinkage. If it looks brittle, torn, or has lost its elasticity, it needs replacing. Next, check for compression. Press lightly on the pads. If they don't bounce back or feel too thin, they may no longer be making proper contact with components, reducing heat transfer. Finally, check for stickiness and adhesion. A good thermal pad should be slightly tacky and adhere to surfaces. If it's too dry or crumbles, it is ineffective and needs replacing. If any of these signs are present, replacing the thermal pads or using thermal putty for a better fit is the best way to restore cooling efficiency. The thermal pads you see in the video are still flexible and can transfer heat effectively. However, I'm going to replace them anyway to show you how it's done. Now, I will explain why using thermal putty is better than traditional thermal pads on the PS5. Thermal pads come in various thicknesses and dimensions depending on the device and its cooling requirements. Additionally, they must be cut to precise sizes for different components, making the replacement process more complicated. The PlayStation 5 Slim uses thermal pads of varying thicknesses, making it difficult to find an exact aftermarket replacement. Instead of struggling with different sizes, thermal putty is the best solution, because it adapts to any gap between components and the heatsink. Unlike traditional pads, thermal putty spreads evenly, ensuring consistent contact for better heat dissipation. Let's start replacing the thermal pads. Use only a plastic tool to remove the old thermal pad from the surface of the metal plate. I recommend using a plastic tool to avoid scratching the surface, which could lead to potential corrosion of the metal. After removing the thermal pads, be sure to wipe all areas where they were applied with isopropyl alcohol to ensure better adhesion of the fresh thermal interface. If liquid metal has pooled in one spot, spread it evenly across the entire heatsink block surface to prevent accidental spillage. If you are using standard cotton swabs, be aware that they may leave behind fibers. It is better to use lint-free or specialized swabs designed for liquid metal application. We are done with the metal plate, so let's move on to the console motherboard. Use only a plastic spatula to remove the old thermal pads, and do this carefully to avoid accidentally damaging the SMD components on the motherboard. After removing the thermal pads, wipe these areas with isopropyl alcohol and a cotton swab. Be extremely careful around resistors, capacitors, and inductors. If you need to remove residual particles from the SMD components, use only an anti-static brush. The motherboard is now ready for fresh thermal putty. Thermal putty varies in thermal conductivity, measured in watts per meter Kelvin. The higher the conductivity, the better the heat transfer. For the PlayStation 5 Slim, the ideal thermal putty should have a thermal conductivity of at least 12 watts per meter Kelvin for effective heat dissipation. I've included a link in the description for recommended materials. Since the PS5 Slim contains high heat generating components, I will use thermal putty with a conductivity of 16.8 watts per meter Kelvin for maximum efficiency. However, if you have 14.8 watts per meter Kelvin, it will work well without overheating risks. That said, I do not recommend using thermal putty with a conductivity lower than 12 watts per meter Kelvin. Thermal putty can be applied using any convenient plastic spatula or by hand. However, it is recommended to wear gloves before applying it manually. The spatula allows for spreading a wide, even layer, while manual application enables forming small granules to match the size of specific components, such as VRM chips and SMD components. I'll show you how to apply it manually a little later. The next important question is how much thermal putty to apply. It is crucial to remember the original layer thickness of the thermal interface on each component. For example, VRM chips originally had a thin layer, so only a small amount of thermal putty should be applied to them. In general, it is better to apply slightly more thermal putty than too little. Under pressure, any excess will be squeezed out, ensuring the necessary space is filled. However, an insufficient amount may leave gaps, preventing effective heat transfer and leading to overheating. On some SMD components, a thicker layer of thermal interface was originally used. Therefore, apply thermal putty in a sufficient quantity to fill the space between the component and the metal cover. Additionally, use blunt-ended tweezers to shape the putty into a pad. When the metal cover is installed, the putty will spread evenly to cover the necessary area. If you still have the old thermal pads, compare their height and always shape the new pad slightly taller than the old one to ensure proper contact. Thermal putty is electrically non-conductive, so there is no need to worry if excess material is squeezed out beyond the surface of the SMD component. As you can see, I did not apply thermal putty to the first and last power inductors, as they didn't have a thermal interface from the manufacturer. This may have been done for cost reasons, or because these components do not require cooling. However, if you believe it is necessary, you can apply thermal putty to these SMD components as well. At this point, I have finished replacing the thermal pads on the PS5 Slim motherboard, and now we can take a look at the final result. Now it's time to install the motherboard, but before that be sure to redistribute the liquid metal on the APU chip and heatsink. If the liquid metal needs to be replaced, this is the right time to do it. I have included a link in the description to a video guide on replacing liquid metal on the PS5 Slim. You can refer to this guide to learn the correct application process and the appropriate amount of liquid metal to use. When installing the mainboard, pay close attention to the metal prongs. Make sure to align the mainboard prongs with the power supply socket. Ensure that the two notches align correctly. This confirms that the mainboard is properly seated in the housing. I thought you might be interested in seeing what the redistributed thermal interface looks like after installing the motherboard. To demonstrate this, I will remove the motherboard again, but don't follow this step, as I am doing it purely for clarity. As you can see, all areas with a thermal interface made contact with the metal cover. Once the motherboard is secured with screws, it will be pressed even more tightly, ensuring that all components are covered with a sufficient layer of thermal interface and that heat is properly distributed. Now, I will reinstall the motherboard and continue replacing the thermal pads on the backside of the board. Use only a plastic tool to remove any thermal pads from the SSD controller and SMD components. Wipe all areas where the old thermal pads were applied with isopropyl alcohol. Use only an anti-static brush to clean hard-to-reach areas of thermal interface residues and particles. Also, remove all thermal pads from the metal cover. Apply thermal putty to the motherboard components in the same way. Keep in mind that some components originally had thicker thermal pads, so be sure to apply a slightly larger amount of thermal interface accordingly. For smaller components, you can apply the thermal putty by your hand, but it is recommended to wear gloves. Simply shape the putty and apply it to the components. Pressure will help distribute it evenly. Wearing gloves is important because the skin produces oils, dirt, and sweat, which can interfere with the putty's thermal conductivity and reduce its effectiveness. Applying thermal putty by hand may be a more convenient method for you. However, remember to ensure complete coverage of the surface while avoiding excess putty. Additionally, you can shape it using a hand tool. At this stage, we have covered all the necessary motherboard components with thermal putty, and now we can take a look at the final result. Now, we can proceed with reassembling the PS5 Slim and testing how it performs with the updated thermal pads. Secure the mainboard with 2 screws. Next, position the bracket with plastic arms first, ensuring the pegs fit into their designated cutouts. Then, place the metal bracket on top of the plastic one, aligning the screw holes. When tightening the screws, alternate between the two, turning each a few times at a time to apply even pressure on the bracket. Avoid fastening one screw completely at a time, as this could damage the APU chip. Install the metal plate and slightly press it down. Secure the metal plate with 30 screws. Reattach the antenna cables in their original positions and reconnect them to the motherboard. Insert the cable into its socket, then place the metal cover and fasten the screws. Install the plastic cover and secure it with screws. Now, install the fan and connect the fan cable to its socket. Secure the fan with 4 screws. Put back the spacer, then install M2 SSD, if you have one, and tighten the screw. To install the disk drive, hook the left edge into its cutouts, then press the drive into place so that the connector in the bottom right corner fits securely into its socket. Finally, to install the covers, align the hooks into their cutouts along the edge of the case, then pull the opposite edge of the cover until the grooves snap into place. If you found this guide helpful, give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more tech tips and guides. Visit our website for more tech insights and do-it-yourself guides. Remember, every tech challenge is an opportunity to learn and grow. I really appreciate you watching my video guide. Feel free to ask any questions about PlayStation 5 Slim in the comments. By the way, if you spilled sugary water on your PS5 controller and the buttons are sticking, check out my tutorial on how to clean and restore the DualSense controller. For additional details, check out the useful links in the description. Thank you for watching How-FixIT, and we'll see you in the next video.